Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood says prison isn't working for women and wants to reduce the number of them behind bars. Now, this comes as the government considers a system which enables prisoners to earn points for early release to ease the general overcrowding crisis.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one. Latest figures from the Ministry of Justice show there are just 3,453 women in prisons across the UK. That's compared to nearly 83,000 men currently locked up behind bars.
So, is it time we let women out of prison in order to make room for men? Former prisoner Scarlett says jail isn't the place for women, and criminal lawyer Rojin Tasman says the crime is the issue, not gender. Let's come to you first of all, Scarlett. Why is prison not the place for women when prison is part of our justice system as a solution for all people and kids in some cases that commit crimes?
Correct. I think it's important to note that the sentencing guidelines for both men and women are the same. So if a man and a woman commit the same crime, they should, in theory, be sentenced to the same length of term of imprisonment. The prisons, however, are not the same. So men's prisons are categorised in terms of security level. So that will go from Category A, for your most seriously violent or prolific offenders, down to Category D, which is an open prison. So that would be for first-time non-violent offenders, or perhaps men serving determinate sentences who are preparing for release back into the community. Women's prisons, 10 out of 12 of them are closed. So for me, for example, I committed perverting the course of justice. It's a crime of dishonesty. I served 4 months. Had I been a male, I would have been sent to an open prison, which means I would have been let out of my cell around 8 or 9 in the morning, had access to outdoor space, meaningful activity, education, to be able to exercise, and I'd be locked back in a cell around 7 or 8 p.m. at night and sleep in the cell. As a female, I was locked in my cell 23 hours a day and allowed out for just the 1 hour because I was in the same wing as women serving life sentences for murder. So my argument is that we don't have the space nor the resources to categorise women according to the severity of the offence. And if we don't have the resources, it shouldn't mean that we're unduly punitively punished.
So, the system isn't set up for women to be treated the same as men. And, of course, there are wider knock-ons. Very often, women are primary caregivers to children or others in their family, and therefore, they have to be treated differently because of the role they play.
Why should they be treated differently? We are upholding justice. Justice is gender neutral, and they are incarcerated because of the crime and the seriousness of that crime. The issue is not sex. The issue, as confirmed by yourself, Scarlett, is the lack of resources, which comes down to lack of funding. It's a much more complex issue than sex. I mean, I think it's quite absurd that this is even a topic that we are discussing. I mean, it's very dangerous to release females earlier than a male. You need to look at the crime, not sex.
There are very few female prisoners, aren't there? There's only about 3,500. There's 90,000 male prisoners.
Correct.
Does that imply that, you know, that already there are a fewer number of people in prison, or do women just do less crime?
I think that it's also important to note women make up around 4% of the prison population but account for 29% of all self-harm incidents. The prison I was in 2022, Eastwood Park, 2 women took their lives within the space of 3 days, and that same prison had a 128% increase in self-harm incidents in the year that I was there. So we've got to look at the conditions. Women are biologically different and respond to different environmental external stimuli. We were deprived of sanitary products, pain relief, access to basic healthcare provision. It's one thing to curtail somebody's freedom, it's quite another to punish them on a level that dehumanises them. You as a woman can appreciate not being able to get tampons or sanitary pads when you're menstruating. It's just very simply dehumanising and degrading.
But, Scarlett, what you're talking about there, is, as Rojin said, is just a lack of resources.
Correct.
So it just needs to be
I
treated better and dealt with better in prisons.
Absolutely.
But the answer, surely, is not setting a precedent where women should get
Correct.
a far more lenient treatment in the legal system.
to be clear, I'm not saying we should be treated differently. I think the Justice Secretary, in prioritising the release of female prisoners, is about life-saving measures. In Eastwood Park, 4 women took their lives in the space of 1 year. Those women were mothers.
But won't there, look, but won't there be some men in prisons who've gone in for fairly light crimes or also possibly fathers?
Yes.
And could well be the primary carers.
Yes.
Should we not look at those people
but
on an equal level and go, well, actually release some of those as well?
Yes, but currently they're in an open prison, so they've already got access to basic things like outdoor space, exercise, healthcare. What I'm saying is 10 of the 12 women's prisons are closed, which means you're locked in a space the size of a bathroom for 23 hours a day, sharing with a complete stranger.
What was your crime, if you don't mind?
Perverting the course of justice.
What did you do?
I lied about 2 speeding fines to avoid being banned.
What was the lie? What did you...
I said somebody else was driving my car.
Right, OK. Wow, and you got given 4 months?
At 16 months, I served 4 inside prison.
Well, you were given 16 months,
yes.
Is that right? Wow, I didn't realise the sentence is so hard. So who were you alongside then? Are you allowed to tell us? Who were some of your inmates? Were they quite, without naming names, but were they very serious offenders?
Yeah, I was on a general population wing. Actually, one of the women who was brought into Eastwood Park, we knew, because we were locked in for a few days, we were watching ITV, there was a documentary on ITV, Logo Mwangi's mother, who was convicted of killing her son and hiding it, along with, I think, her stepfather. Our prison went into lockdown for a couple of days because, again, all the security is deployed to protect this one serious offender. So we were all in the same wing with very serious offenders.
So Regina, you know, if they can't find the resources, and if you're only talking about 3,500 female prisoners, you can see why they probably don't have all the different separate resources. That'd be a lot of money for quite a few number of people. Surely, maybe there is an exception here. We need to look at this, and actually, if it's going to free up more spaces, it's not a bad move by Shabana.
This is a very bad move. All the points made, respectfully, are also relevant to all the males. Male, female sex, they're going through the same thing, lack of resources. If I statistically quote correctly, there's 107 male prisons, only 12 female prisons and 4 for the juveniles, those that are under the age of 18. The issue here is much more complex than sex and gender. Again, it's understaffed, under-resourced, underfunded. The Ministry of Justice needs to look at the issues, not sex.
I suppose the Justice Secretary knows there isn't a money tree, knows that the prison service is in crisis, seeing early release of prisoners that within categories, not dangerous ones anyway, and is trying to put a case for why the situation women in might be there. You know, on any level, can you see any plus to this?
No, because if there's going to be early releases, it should be both for the male sex and the female sex, and it should be based on the crime, not gender. I mean...
Well, when we looked at, there was a graded early release scheme that started a few weeks ago. A few thousand prisoners were released. The majority were men, but simply because there's more men in prison than there are women. So it does work both ways. A few weeks ago, a lot of men were released and only a few hundred women.
Well, there's an interesting stat that the women who would do sentences less than 12 months, let's say, 73% of them are likely to reoffend. That is extraordinarily high. Why do you think that is?
I'm actually unsure of the reoffending rates for men, but I know that we have the highest recidivism rate in the whole of Western Europe, mostly because we release people homeless, unemployed. You get £72 in cash in your hand. I was homeless when I was released, but I'm lucky enough to have a very supportive family. But I was considered resettled because my mum had a sofa. I wasn't resident in the UK at the point of my release.
Right.
I was living abroad when I was in prison, so I was released and I couldn't leave the country again for another year and a half. So there's no resettlement. Rojin is completely right. It's more about the system as a whole. I don't specifically agree with just releasing loads of people back onto the streets. The chances of reoffending are very high. We need to have better community measures in place where we rehome people, we get them into employment.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but Scarlett Roberts, former prison inmate, thanks very much for joining us, and Rojin Tasman, you put your point across very well, I thought, criminal lawyer. We asked whether we should be letting women out of prison to make room for men. 25% said yes, 75% adamant and said no. So that's
won our viewers' votes on that.
Should have been much higher.
I love it. She just sticks to her ground, Rojin. You've got to give her that. Yeah.